Ode to Joy is like, it's the default thing that plays in my head when I don't have something else playing in my head. Like, if I don't have a song stuck in my head, Ode to Joy is on loop in there.
What are you talking about? Hello and welcome to Baggage Claim, an unofficial Jet Lag the Game companion podcast. We are here to unpack Season 13, Schengen Showdown, Episode 2. I'm Casey.
I'm Kira.
And I'm Jaya.
Kira, do you play any instruments?
I don't play any instruments currently, but in elementary school and in 6th grade, I played the clarinet.
Jaya, what about you? And if you had to play a non-musical instrument, would you choose a bottle or a ruler?
I actually used to play the violin and then also learned how to play the guitar in high school at one point, but it was in my emo phase, so it was really a time. And if I had to play a non-musical instrument, I would easily choose a bottle. Making sounds on, like, easy bottles in 7th grade was my specialty. I was so good at that, and I would absolutely win.
It feels like you're kind of a musical prodigy. I didn't know that you played all those instruments.
I did used to do a lot of music.
I feel like the bottle would also be my call, but I don't think that I would succeed. I don't think that I'm musically inclined, although I did play the clarinet for many years, which is extremely obvious. If you notice anything about me and my personality, it is extremely obvious that I played the clarinet. Let's get into the recap. The three of us are much less nervous this episode because it's our second episode, which is unfortunately more than I could say for the Jet Lag boys, who seem to be having one of the most stressful episode 2s of all time.
Yeah.
The episode opens with both teams getting Deutsche Bond. Ben and Adam's plan is merely delayed, while Sam and Tom decide to change plans, go back to Brussels, and splurge 20% of their travel budget to fly to Vienna the next morning. On the way, their train is overtaken by a bicycle.
That guy, new favorite Jet Lag NPC.
I know. Ben and Adam scoop a 2-point steal by liberating France, succeeding at a challenge to open an unpopular museum, which they install in a doorway, aka the most stress I've ever experienced watching people walk. Sam contemplates the issue of the sun not rising, coming to the conclusion that at least it would be equally difficult for both teams. As both teams race to lock Austria, we witness one of the most stressful sequences in Jet Lag history, which ultimately ends when Adam proves himself to be the MVP of this episode by performing Ode to Joy on glass bottles at a frankly unimaginable speed. Adam's victorious performance truly taught me the meaning of the ode's titular joy. Thank you.
That really got me.
Thank you. The score at the end of the episode, 4-2, with Ben and Adam in the lead. To conclude our recap, I've come up with a title to highlight the most important moment of the episode, in my opinion. Based on the pure verve of Adam's musical performance, I propose to title this episode Bittersweet Symphony.
I like that a lot.
That's really sweet.
That's really good, Casey.
That's such a, like, classic title. It's, like, somehow classy and also making fun of him at the same time.
It just really, that moment was so resonant in my mind. Any alternate titles you'd like to propose?
I did have another title, and it's just straight up something that Ben says, but I feel like it does encompass the episode, which is, have you considered locking in?
I will say, ever since I watched this episode, truly every day, I have asked myself that question at least 5 times.
If I was Adam and, like, crashing out trying to learn Ode to Joy on wine bottles, and then Ben in the background said, have you considered locking in? I think I would either, like, unlock my most power ever or single-handedly throttle him.
And I think both reactions would be so valid. And we will definitely talk more about Adam's just, like, supreme power in this episode. But first, let me kick things off to Kira for the strategy.
Thanks, Casey. Let's get into the Strat Chat, which is our segment where we break down the strategy and gameplay of the episode. At the beginning of the episode, Team Sam and Tom were planning on going to Cologne to get the flight into Vienna, while Team Badam planned to first steal France before continuing on to Austria. Of course, both teams get Deutsche Bond, but while Team Badam only got delayed, Sam and Tom had to completely change tactics by going back to Brussels to get a later and more expensive flight to Vienna the next morning. Sam and Tom explain that they want to end their day near an airport because the best flights are always going to be in the mornings, It's also worth noting that the airport that they ultimately end up going to, Brussels, also had flights to Nice and Copenhagen, which they briefly mention. So Nice would have given them an opportunity to lock down France, although Ben and Adam were already visibly en route and would have beaten them there. And Copenhagen would have let them claim Denmark pretty uncontestedly, but didn't have any clear paths to nearby countries, so I do agree that Vienna was their best option of those 3 flights. It's at this point that Ben and Adam discuss their theory that Sam and Tom should have actually gone on a train to Luxembourg, which would have given them another country on the board even faster than flying somewhere. I'm curious your thoughts on these 2 strategies. The first one being prioritizing getting countries fast and in the moment, which seems to be more Team Badam strategy right now, versus letting there be more dead time, but setting yourself up well for the future, which is what Sam and Tom seem to be doing. What do you guys think?
I think Sam and Tom are kind of playing a dangerous game, because if they're setting themselves up well for the future, it means that they're not going to be super flexible in responding to things that Ben and Adam do that are unexpected. And of course, they're going to do unexpected things due to the nature of this game. But also, then when do they switch from planning to be able to do a lot of things and setting themselves up to just doing stuff? Because at some point, they're going to have to be a lot more unpredictable with just how the game ends up unfolding, because every action is going to butterfly effect. But that being said, I do think they have a really good idea of setting themselves up close to an airport every evening. So ending the day near an airport makes a lot of sense in order to be flexible for the next day.
The other big piece of strategy that I want to talk about is what happens when both teams reach Austria and see what the challenge is. So since Sam and Tom are the first team in the country, they auto-claim it, which means that Ben and Adam really need to do well on the Ode to Joy challenge if they want their train ride to be worth it. So when Sam and Tom open the challenge on their train from the airport, they almost immediately start discussing the option of waiting it out to see whether Ben and Adam fail the challenge. Ultimately, they decide that they might as well start the challenge, and then they can decide later whether to actually formally put in an attempt. This decision largely comes from their desire to put pressure on Team Badam, making them think that they had to rush so they would maybe trip up and fail. I think there are sort of 2 things going on here that I want to get your opinions on. First, I think Sam and Tom failing the Netherlands challenge, I think, is really playing into their strategy, because they've seen firsthand that the challenges are failable, and so they're pretty cautious about challenges, and they're more comfortable with the prediction that Ben and Adam might fail. Whereas on the other hand, Team Badam hasn't failed a challenge yet. And so I'm curious, how do you think each team's previous challenges are psychologically impacting their strategies going forward?
I do think that the fact that Sam and Tom failed the Netherlands challenge is definitely impacting their strategy of attempting challenges or not. I think it's also impacting their prediction of how long challenges will take and where the best place to be positioned to attempt them. Versus, I think Ben and Adam, they haven't failed a challenge yet, but I also think that they aren't planning on not attempting a challenge with the risk that they fail. Like here, they were the second team to this country. They knew that if they failed the challenge, they wouldn't be able to lock it. But because attempting the challenge was their only chance at claiming that country, they were going to go for it anyway. And so I think that that strategy about the challenges is kind of linked to their overall strategy, which seems to be going to countries after the other team and attempting the challenges in order to lock them. And in this episode, we see through a combination of skill and luck, they successfully take both steals and they successfully lock both countries, which I think is a really good that's the best outcome that they could hope for. But it is equally possible that they fail both challenges and then they just spent so much time not gaining any additional points on the board.
Yeah, I think Ben and Adam have quite a lot more confidence in their ability to succeed on challenges than Sam and Tom do. And I think part of that is just because, there are some challenges that are more luck-based and less, winnable if you lock in or put the time in. And like we saw in Australia, I think was the last time that they really talked about this, the challenges that they prefer are the ones that if you try hard enough, if you spend enough time in it, you can do it. It's just going to be a big time investment. And so I think Ben and Adam are pretty open to that time investment, and they're like, well, if something is luck and we just lose it, then that's fine and we'll move on.
And I think that time investment piece is exactly why Sam and Tom chose their strategy of maybe not going as aggressively after the challenge as they might have if they felt like they really needed it, but still looking like they were attempting the challenge to try to force Ben and Adam to rush and therefore fail the challenge. I thought that was a really interesting piece of kind of psychological mind games that definitely pushed Ben and Adam slightly out of their comfort zone, knowing that they couldn't take all the time in the world to attempt the challenge.
Okay, I am actually extremely happy that you're bringing this up, because this directly leads into my second thought on this challenge, which is about whether putting pressure on Team Badham was actually a helpful decision. I personally feel like it may have been a smarter decision for Sam and Tom to almost immediately cede Austria and just leave. And if Sam and Tom had just straight up left, then yes, they would have been almost guaranteeing that Badham would steal Austria, but also Team Badham would have had an incentive to really take their time, cutting into the time that they could have spent going down into Liechtenstein or positioning themselves in any kind of big transit hub for that matter. And so what do you both think, Casey and Jaya? Do you think there's an advantage to Sam and Tom pressuring Ben and Adam? Or would it have been better for them to start racking up the other nearby countries while Ben and Adam waste their time?
I actually love this question. I think I hadn't thought about that as an option, but I think you might be right that Sam and Tom would have needed to spend quite a bit of time just like on a train getting out of Austria. And during that whole time, they would have been in Austria. I think they could have really played that to their advantage of like, we're doing something that y'all have no fucking idea about. And what if they're about to steal a challenge right out from under them? And then eventually it would have become obvious, like, they're just going to bank on Ben and Adam failing it because they do already own Austria. But I do think that your point that Badham really spending their time on this challenge could have cut into their time into any other country that they will go to in the future. But I don't know if it would have necessarily impacted them that much because they did rehearse it until they were able to get it. And it did seem like they were actually like taking quite a lot of time to do this challenge. Vienna is valuable because you have 3 really close neighboring countries. And so going to those instead of just waiting could have been really good in avoiding dead time.
I think this is such an interesting question because so much of the question depends on what the outcome is.
Yeah.
And if Ben and Adam had failed this challenge, then I think, yeah, like Sam and Tom could have gotten that head start in claiming other countries. But we just really didn't know that at the time. And I really do think that their strategy of trying to push Ben and Adam to rush and potentially raise that chance of failing the challenge was a really good thought. It just didn't end up bringing the outcome that they were hoping for. I think that their gameplay was smart here. In hindsight, yes, maybe that time would have been used better by going to another country. But I think it was just it felt like such a failable challenge that it could have gone either way, even until the very like last moments of that challenge.
That's completely true. It was such a failable challenge. Like I'll get into this as we conclude, but like the many takes that they showed where Adam was getting one note wrong and it didn't even seem like he knew that note was wrong. Absolutely devastating. Like had he locked into that version and gotten it wrong.
And I think we've seen this season, Amy is not holding back. These challenges are all so hard. And I think all of them are more failable than the average challenge in past seasons, which is, number one, just pure girl bossery. We love to see it. But 2, like, opening these challenges, it really is the question of, like, is this even possible?
Yeah.
Not even just with the people that are opening the challenge, but, like, in general. I really saw this challenge and I was like, there's no way. Like, this is such a long piece of music. They have to collect all of the component parts. And as soon as they played that 140 beats per minute.
That was crazy.
Yeah, that was fast.
My jaw dropped. I was like, there's no way this is happening. And I think that made for really satisfying entertainment. But in the moment, I don't blame Sam and Tom at all for looking at this and thinking, this is pretty tricky. Maybe we could kind of keep our our foot on the pedal and try to increase the pressure a little bit on Ben and Adam, thinking, there's a very real possibility that they fail.
I apparently know Ode to Joy better than all of them except Tom. So they opened that challenge and I was like, oh, hell yeah, this is so doable. Absolutely. I love to see it. But then I need to remember that Ode to Joy is like, it's the default thing that plays in my head when I don't have something else playing in my head. Like, if I don't have a song stuck in my head, Ode to Joy is on loop in there.
What are you talking about? Jaya!
It's on in there constantly.
What are you
talking about? I know Ode to Joy so well.
Okay.
Well, so I saw this challenge and I was like, oh, yeah.
Like, I was built for this.
Yeah.
Jaya, that is the least relatable thing you've ever said to me. I'm actually floored. Wow.
Well, with that, I'll hand it over to Casey.
Thanks, Kira. We are now moving into a segment called WWBCAUJLTGCPD, aka What Would Baggage Claim, an unofficial Jet Lag the Game companion podcast, do? In this episode, we see 2 steals from Ben and Adam and no new countries claimed for Sam and Tom, bringing it up to a 2-point lead for Ben and Adam. I want you both to imagine you are Sam and Tom at the beginning of this episode. Would you do anything different in this episode?
I think they should have pivoted to something different when that train was canceled. Going back to a country that they locked and going so deep into that country for like quite a few hours. On day 1 of the game, those few hours really matter.
I agree, and I also think that I would have gone to Luxembourg specifically to avoid taking a plane, because in the beginning of the season, I was sort of thinking, $4,000 budget sort of feels like enough money, considering that they're mostly taking trains anyway. But now that I see that a single flight for the 2 of them took up a huge chunk of their budget, I'm thinking that it's maybe better to save that all for the end, where most countries in play, I'm assuming, are going to be locked, which means that you're going to need to travel further at the end of the game in order to get to the few countries that are either unclaimed or unlocked.
I completely agree about the cost of this flight. I think it was pretty painful to see this flight cost 20% of their overall budget.
They also seemed to really hate how expensive this flight was.
Especially seeing ultimately at the end of the episode that they don't even... They spent that much money to not even get the country they flew
it's devastating.
to.
But then they did end up in a better spot. So, maybe to play devil's advocate, I personally would not have done that. But, maybe it's okay.
I wonder if they had immediately booked it out of Austria and gone for other countries, if they would be able to have a little bit of additional time to start really trying to lock countries down as they go, because we've seen 2 countries being stolen from them, with the potential of the Netherlands also being stolen from them. And last episode, I talked a lot about how I felt like claiming countries quick and not locking them down was the better strategy because they're racking up points and the other team is having to waste a lot of time to go back. And I still think that that makes sense as a strategy. But here, as we're seeing the time sink of they went back to a country they'd already locked to fly to a new country that they didn't end up leaving with, I think it's now a little tougher to justify racking up new countries without trying to lock them down. Wrapping up this hypothetical, I am going to pass things on to Jaya for a little game.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, so I've set up a weird little game for you guys. We are going to be calling it The Train of Lies.
Ooh.
In this game, I am going to be presenting you with 3 things, and only one of them is true. We'll play 2 rounds of this, each one with a different theme, and at the end, one of you, hopefully, will come out on top. Or maybe I'll win, and I'll have tricked you both times.
Oh, no.
So in this episode, Ben and Adam go to the Pocket Museum and then create the Pocket Museum, both of which are fairly unusual approaches to what a museum is. And so I will be presenting you with 3 strange museums in France, because this challenge was done in France. And you 2 will have to tell me which one of these is actually real.
I already know this is going to be so hard. France is full of freaks. They're going to have some freaky museums.
So speaking of freaks,
Oh, no.
according to legend, this is the background story for this one is completely hearsay. It's all legend. Nobody really knows if this guy was real. But according to legend, an eccentric military man in the 1850s harbored a special love for tailless amphibians, and he began collecting frogs while he was walking through the countryside. This quirky old rich man would take them home, taxidermy them, and pose them into quirky little dioramas. And this leads to today's Frog Museum. It's a collection of satirical tableaus of domestic life in the 19th century, but all of them are created with frogs. And a look into the Frog Museum will show you scenes like little frogs in a top hat playing the piano, or a bunch of frogs sitting at what either looks like pews or in rows in a school classroom. I couldn't quite tell. Option 2. So in 1990, a company called Befco introduced a cracker into the world. This cracker was an incredible success, and the cracker factory opened for public tours in 2002. The factory was then expanded and renovated in 2008 and called the Cracker Museum. At the entrance doors of this museum stand 2 mascots for the company, which are just anthropomorphic crackers with kind of asymmetrical faces. These mascots can also be found on the roof and in the official company logo. And option 3, you'll find if you head just outside the city of Clergy, a cellular biologist who hyperfixated on the history of absinthe. This biologist found an old-fashioned absinthe spoon in 1981, got really into it, and started collecting paraphernalia and advertisements about this green goo, eventually opening the Museum of Absinthe. This museum replicates a cafe from the late 19th and early 20th century when poets and artists would drink absinthe in fancy European cafes and call the green liquid their muse. Which one of those do you think is real?
Oh, this is tricky.
The Cracker Museum sounds boring, which maybe means that it is French because there are so many museums in France.
I love the idea of the Frog Museum, but I don't know that it feels immediately French to me. It feels like it could be British.
Can we guess where the other ones are from?
Oh, please. I'll give you a bonus point.
So the frogs kind of scream British to me.
Okay. Kira, do you agree?
My first thought was Germany based on absolutely nothing but vibes and cardinal directions.
Okay, huge fan of that.
The Cracker Museum feels American to me in a way of I have definitely seen a lot of museums where it's oh, I invented a product and now there's a museum celebrating my product. That is how I feel about that one. Absinthe feels French.
So, Casey, do you want to put your money on the Absinthe Museum being French?
I think I'm going to go with the Absinthe Museum.
Kira, what about you? You've established that you think the Frog Museum is German. What about the Cracker Museum and the Absinthe Museum?
I'm going to say that the Cracker Museum is French because there are so many museums. Although now that Casey's explained her thought about the Cracker Museum being American, I'm feeling rather swayed. But I'm gonna lock it in, and I'm gonna say that the Absinthe Museum, I'll say that one's British.
Casey was correct.
Yes!
The Absinthe Museum is the French one.
Yes.
The Cracker Museum is actually the Rice Cracker Museum in Japan.
Oh! Well, if you'd said rice crackers, they deserve
Well,
a
that's
museum.
why I said the Cracker
picturing
Museum.
Ritz.
No, it was the Rice Cracker Museum in Niigata, Japan, which is a place that they went, so I wanted to include that.
That rocks.
Well, frankly, I would go to that. That sounds extremely interesting.
Right? It seemed to be more described as a little shrine than a full museum, but it is called the Rice Cracker Museum.
I have been to a shrine to rice crackers, and it's called My Kitchen.
And the Frog Museum, it sure did sound like it could be French, and that's because it was Swiss.
Oh.
I will say I was closer.
You were closer.
We're giving partial credit.
The Swiss.
Kira gets more partial credit, but neither of you get the points on
I got
the bonus
point.
questions.
We're not giving partial credit. I won.
Oh, I meant the points on the bonus questions. Yeah, Casey, you won that.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaya.
That was well played. That was good.
So our second round on the Train of Lies is because Ben and Adam here visit a place called Saint Louis or St. Louis in France. And so here I'm going to present you with 3 facts about the lesser known or more known counterparts of cities that they visited in this episode.
Oh boy.
So for Brussels, in southern Manitoba, Canada, you'll find a small community called Brussels. The name was chosen by an archbishop because the community's first parish priest seemed to have been from Belgium. However, It was decided one day that the original town had been built in a poor location, so they just up and moved the entire town about 2 miles south.
What? Whoa. Love that.
Now, if you head a couple hours outside the capital of Rwanda, you'll reach the city of Basel. The president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, has been on record saying that he does not know where Basel, Rwanda is, despite having been pictured having dinner with other country and regional leaders there. This last one has the most obvious counterpart: St. Louis, Missouri versus St. Louis, France. The first time I remember learning about St. Louis, Missouri was in Percy Jackson when Annabeth takes him to the Gateway Arch and Percy kills Echidna. Percy then jumps into the Mississippi River, leading to a tourist trap shop in real life next to this river, famously selling stickers saying, "I met Echidna at the St. Louis Arch," with a photo of the animal Echidna. Which one of these is true?
I'm going to be so bad at this because, frankly, they all sound like they could be real.
I'm very intrigued by this town that has been moved 2 miles, because it does seem like kind of an old-timey thing to do, to settle somewhere and then be like, didn't get it quite right. Let's run this back. The Basel, Rwanda one is very interesting also. And it does seem like a politician thing to do, to deny something that is objectively true and provable.
Right.
Okay, I'm gonna galaxy brain this. I think that the Percy Jackson one is not true, because I think Jaya is trying to bait us into thinking it's true because we are all big Percy Jackson fans.
I was going to say, I think of the three, that's the one that Jaya is the most likely to have invented. And then, did you mention why the one in Rwanda was called
Surely.
Basel?
I did not, but I can tell you it's just because Belgium colonized Rwanda.
Surely it's colonization.
That one maybe feels the most likely to me.
I think I am going to go with the first one, because something about the moving towns, locations, I really can see being true.
I fear that I'm going to be bad at this game forever.
Kira, I hate to confirm your fears, but Casey did win this.
Yes!
Brussels is a small community in Manitoba, Canada. It is actually spelled the French way, Bruxelles, rather than Brussels, the Belgian way. Basel, I completely invented.
Yeah.
And St. Louis also invented, because I was running out of time and panicking, and I said Percy Jackson's in my mind, so you guys know me extremely well for that one.
Well, I'm glad we got one of them right. Well, Casey got all of them right. I was able to identify one.
I am on the top of the world.
Well, while you're on the top of the world, Casey, I'll hand it back to you for conclusions.
Thank you. So now it is time to turn to our rosebud thorns of this episode. Jaya, why don't we start with you? What were your rosebud and thorn?
Okay, so my rose, I just loved the Pocket Museum. I think it fits so perfectly into that door, and it was just so cute. My thorn, when Adam was rehearsing Ode to Joy, and he was getting that one note wrong, and it wasn't clear if he knew that note was wrong, truly took years off my life. Probably some of the most stressed I have ever been while watching Jetlag, just because I was like, if he fails this challenge, I don't want this to be why he fails the challenge. My bud is that we had already met the creatures that were Drunk Ben, Drunk Adam, and Drunk Sam, but we met this new creature in this episode, which was No Breakfast Caffeinated Adam.
Yes.
And that was an extraordinarily, maybe embarrassingly relatable creature. And I just hope, for his sake, that we don't see that again, but for our sake, we see it once.
Kira, what were your rosebud and thorn?
My rose was Adam's final performance of Ode to Joy. I thought it was so impressive, and I thought that the payoff was truly incredible. My thorn is that compared to other Jetlag episodes, I feel like there was less country-specific scenery in this episode. And then my bud is that Team Badham had Euros this time to buy the big bottle of wine, which means that they're actively applying what they're learning in the game. People are learning in real time and applying what they're learning, and I think that's a great bud. My
rose was also Adam's performance of Ode to Joy. I thought it was an incredible experience to behold, truly an edge of my seat moment. And it proves once again that truly any challenge that has to do with rhythm is Adam's for the winning. But my thorn, this was a tough episode for Team Sam. It's challenges like Ode to Joy where my devotion to being Team Sam kind of wavers. Ben and Adam just absolutely bodied this episode, and although I will not stray from being Team Sam, not a lot of action from his team. This was kind of an it's so over episode. But my bud is that this episode does end with a score of 4-2, which means that Team Sam is once again the underdog. And we have trained for these moments. So I hope that they can scoop some more neighboring countries in the next episode, and I'm really excited to see what comes next. Thank you for waiting at Baggage Claim. Let us know your thoughts on socials at baggageclaimpod or at our email in the description. We'll see you next week at the Baggage Claim down that way. No, a little further. Keep going. It's just a little bit further. Yeah, keep walking. You'll find it eventually. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
The odes to joy.
It's so true.
Thank you.
That's really good, Casey.
Thank you.